well, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order and move forward and do a roll call.
All right, Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Here.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Miss Goodman,
Here.
Mr. Peterson, Mr. Gentili.
Here.
Okay. Hey, thank you for everybody showing up today. We've had a few wins and obviously we have no deer hunters. That's great. I presume everybody has gotten the agenda, a copy of the agenda, has had a chance to review it. And could I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
There you go.
Gary, actually, I would like to add an item to the agenda.
Well, Barry, it's too late now. Go ahead.
It's what I just handed to you.
Okay.
It's a 5th contract modification for our paving project. And I'd like to put it under old business since last month we approved contract mod 4, and there was a mistake in that modification, so this is correcting it, and I'll explain it more at that point in the agenda.
So you really don't need it amended, you just need it under old business, which is okay.
Yeah, it's there's no dollar change. It's just they coded some of the accounts wrong.
Yeah, so the agenda is fine. So I'll make that motion to approve the agenda.
By putting this thing that Barry's talking about under old business?
That's old business. So you're just refreshing what you've already discussed, so shouldn't be an issue.
Sounds good to me. I'll buy that. And I'll second that. Julie, could we have a roll call on that, please?
Yep, Mr. Bergstrom. Oh,
Yes. Yes.
go ahead, Jeff.
Yes. I'm just gonna say this one, you don't need a roll call on, but
Oh, that's, well,
Okay.
we didn't do the roll call before because Barry interrupted on the original agenda. So
that's
continue.
what we're voting on. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Miss Goodman,
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce.
Yes.
Okay. We have no public comments, so we'll go ahead and move on. Next item is the approval of the October 19, 2020 regular meeting minutes. I presume everybody has gotten a copy of it and has had a chance to review it. Any comments, changes? The only thing that I've seen in there was Julie on the second page where we were tabbing up votes for the September 2020 accounts payable report. You have the yeas as 6. I believe that should be 7.
Oh, okay.
I guess we just put a line through that with an initial and go forward without redoing the whole thing.
Okay.
If there's no further comments, Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Do I have a motion?
Oh, motion,
To
I'm
approve.
sorry.
Motion to approve the minutes. Because we're on.
Support.
Okay, now Julie,
did.
go ahead.
I did hear Mr. Gentili support, correct?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, minutes. Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Miss Goodman.
Yes.
Okay, the next item up is the treasurer's report, October 2020 accounts payable. And I presume everybody has gotten a copy of that, has had a chance to review it. And Susan, you're on board with us here?
I am.
Okay. I was just gonna throw it at you, just ask you if you had any comments on what was presented to us so far.
Nope, I just need those accounts payable approved. They've already been paid, but, two items, the meet and hunt, the airport layout plan update, and then also the Right Side Design LLC. Those were both for September. So those got posted when we paid them to September. So
Okay,
they're here to approve, but when you look at the, October revenue and expenses, they don't show up in October because they were actually for September, so,
okay, I noticed that.
yeah. And then they actually didn't get paid till November, so when you look at your trial balance, that's what the outstanding accounts liability makes up, are those two items, so,
Okay.
okay?
Any further comments on the October 2020 accounts payable?
One thing I will add to that discussion is because September is the end of the fiscal year, we're trying to make sure that everything gets posted into the correct fiscal year. Some of these things that came in a little bit late are therefore going back like that.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, could I have a motion to approve the October 2020 accounts payable as presented?
I'll make that motion, Mark.
Okay, do I hear a
Sure.
second?
Was that you, Karen?
I believe.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Julia, roll call, please.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
yes,
Ms. Goodman,
Yes,
Mr. Ha,
Yes,
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Dents.
Yes,
okay, moving on. Next item is the October 2020 financial statement where we have October 2020 revenues and expenses, trial balance, and a few rental notes and fuel pumping notes. Any comments? Everybody's had a copy and had a chance to look at it. Any comments? If not, could I have a motion to approve the October 2020 financial statement, revenues and expenses, trial balance sheet?
so
And,
moved.
okay. Do I hear a second?
second,
Get all that?
I did.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
yes,
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
yes,
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dents.
Yes,
Okay,
If I could interrupt, I just want to let you know that Barry Peterson just joined.
oh, okay,
I don't know how long he's been waiting. Sorry, Barry, if I didn't notice you were waiting there for a while.
No, I just arrived. Thank you for letting me in. I'm sorry I'm late.
you're excused. You're okay. Okay. Phil says don't let it happen again. Okay, we'll go from there. Next item is committee reports and discussion. To my knowledge, there was no executive committee. Also, no budget committee and no capital projects committee meeting this last month. So at this point in time, Barry, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I will get my report. Okay, no accidents or incidents for the month, although unfortunately, over this weekend, just outside the airport on River Road, there was a car accident. A youth lost his life, which is very unfortunate, but EAS eligibility, again, nothing really new here to report. We are on track for this. And again, that last bullet point, barring any pandemic shutdown, I know starting this Wednesday, things are starting to contract again based on the governor's and health department's orders last night that take effect on Wednesday. I mentioned this later, I'm starting to see that start to impact our employment numbers. But even with the number that we currently have booked for the rest of the year, we will be fine on this. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't start going significantly the other way if people started canceling because of the current situation. As of today, we're probably right at where we need to be, give or take some. So, we just keeping an eye on our employments and make sure that we remain EAS eligible.
According to my calculations, we need 148 more to make the 2,800 mark.
And we've already got about, since we're, on the 16th of November, we've basically, probably done about that many this month already. So that's kind of, as of today, we're really about at that number.
Good. Good.
So airfares, so far so good. 2 months into Cape Air service. Airfares out of Manistee still are doing very well. You'll see here on this report. So this would be a snapshot of fares that I did over the weekend, looking at mid-December travel. And you'll see that Manistee, 2 months in a row, is now the least expensive airport in the region to fly out of, to these 20 destinations across the country. Grand Rapids and Traverse City are about equal. And then Muskegon is a little bit higher than those two airports. It's kind of a little bit, all over. In a few cases, Traverse City is the least expensive. Few more, Grand Rapids, and the bulk is coming out of Manistee. Some of them are close. Some of them are, a little bit more farther apart. One of the things I'm, again, mentioned later on in my report is last month I had reported that basically beginning the 1st of October, American United basically matched Cape Air's fares out of Traverse City and Grand Rapids. And those were set to expire toward the end of October, and they did. And those airlines did not renew those kind of low fares. So they matched fares kind of during our introductory period, but have now returned kind of to their standard fares. So especially out of Chicago, it's not even close with flights out of the other airports. When you start connecting on to other destinations, it's a little bit, some good for some Manistee, some good for Grand Rapids. But overall, these are really good numbers, and hopefully we can continue to see this happening. And again, those initial numbers on the top half of this report are just the raw fare. When you take into account the fact that we've got free airport parking and none of the other airports do, that even adds to the benefit of flying out of Manistee right now. Any questions on airfares?
Is the airlines that we've got making money at $78 a ticket?
Well, that's the benefit of the EAS subsidy that makes that all possible.
Wow, that much, huh?
Barry, if I remember right, last month, we were also the low one last month, weren't we, when you reported on the same thing?
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's
this
good.
in a row. You know, I was thinking maybe it was just a fluke last month.
Right.
Now, again, I will caveat all of this with the fact that nothing about the airline industry is normal right now. So therefore, I wouldn't necessarily assume that this is a long-term situation, but I think possibly for the foreseeable future, through the winter, this is something that we might become accustomed to, at least in the shorter term.
Good, good.
Okay, then moving on to actually our enplanement numbers and on-time percentage for the month. So in the month of October, we had a total of 552 passengers. And I'll say this is an estimate. Under public charters, I actually had a login into their system so I could generate an exact number. This is a little bit more of an estimate based on kind of daily activity that I keep track of during the month. It will get refined when I get final numbers from Cape Air, but that's not due to us until later in the month. So these are kind of estimates. But having said that, October was our second best month so far of the year. Came pretty close, within striking distance of being the best month, which was July. Still down from a year ago, but given that we're in a pandemic and travel is being actively discouraged, still a significant uptick from where we were percentage-wise, kind of year prior comparison, prior months. So overall, October was good, and I was reporting some of that at our October meeting while we were in the middle of the month, but these are kind of the end numbers for the month. On the performance side, we had a total of 4 canceled flights during October. Those 4 ended up being 2 flights on 2 different days. One of the benefits of having 2 round trips a day at a minimum, and in the summer we'll have more than that, is that there was no day this month where we didn't have any flights. So even those 2 days that we did have some cancellations, we still did have other flights that operated those days. And I believe 2 of those 4 were a mechanical issue and the other 2 were weather related. So overall, that's pretty close to national averages. A 2 to 3% cancellation rate is typical across all airlines, across all airports in the nation. So that kind of fits into kind of a standard average. And then on the delay side, 19% delayed, and that's a higher than we're used to seeing. But again, that is typical of kind of national averages. A couple things I'll kind of caveat there is we're now flying into O'Hare versus Midway, that may play a role in that, basically being held here on the ground at certain times, waiting to basically get our slot into O'Hare. But also, just anecdotally, I didn't actually write down specific statistics for this, but a lot of these delays were just departure delays out of here that the cutoff is 15 minutes to count as a delay. And there were a number that were in the 20 to 30 minute range. And actually, the way things are scheduled right now into O'Hare, there's actually a lot of padding. So I suspect actually many of those arrived on time in O'Hare, even though they departed a little bit late out of here and qualified as delayed. So I don't see a significant issue from a passenger perspective, missing connections. But it is something that I think can get tightened up. And the other thing I noticed is that a lot of those delays happened on the morning flight, the 7:15 departure out of here. And I think that may just be a growing pain, a startup issue that can get kind of smoother over time. One thing procedurally that I will say that I think we will see higher numbers in that delay than we saw under public charters is that Cape Air is very lenient in accepting people who come in late. So if someone comes in 10 minutes before their, scheduled flight, someone comes in at the scheduled flight time, they will hold that plane for that passenger. And if someone comes in, they've got to get checked in, they've got to go through TSA. And while none of those things may take a long time, it's still going to end up being at least a 15-minute delay for that flight. That's their customer service policy, is that they will hold flights for late arrivals up to a point, obviously. And I think that 7:15 flight, we may see more of that where just people are sleeping in a little bit more than they should. So I just kind of back on why that number, because if you look at every other number this year, we've not had historically much in the way of delays, and now suddenly we do. But again, I think that it's, again, in line with the industry average, and there are, I think, very real reasons as to why it is, and I'm not concerned. Sorry, long explanation. Any questions?
Yeah, Barry, I was just going to comment that, if I was a passenger on the plane and I'm waiting for late arrivals to check in there and I miss my connection on the other end, I'm going to be kind of ticked.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's a balancing act.
Right, exactly.
There's people are also ticked if they get here in time and their perception of on time may be wrong, and they're watching the plane sit there and then leave without them. They're ticked too. So it's a balancing act.
Right.
Barry,
Is more prone to hold where our previous carrier was not.
Barry, just to give you some feedback to validate what you're saying, because I've unfortunately had to fly 4 times in the last 7 days. One was a round trip on United, and we had departure delays because of the extra cleaning, and the cleaning crew's trying to get everything done to get the plane ready for the next boarding session. And then Southwest, Friday I flew, we had a delayed departure out of Grand Rapids, but we still actually got into Denver 30 minutes early because they had padded the timing so much. And then yesterday flying back, we were delayed departure because of the cleaning crew again.
Yep, good to hear. Well, I don't know about good to hear, but again, it is kind of the status of the industry.
Correct.
Okay, I will move on. So, still no update on fuel system monitor. That is something I will get done this winter. I'm starting to get caught up from being behind with the summer and then air carrier changes. So I'm starting to tack off things that have been on my list for extended period of time.
Barry, the fuel system monitor is causing us no problems at this point in time.
From a compliance standpoint, technically it is, because I'm not getting leak detection reports, but it's not inhibiting operations.
Okay, so eventually it's going to catch us, but not at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had given an update last month about the Coho billboard Coho Bend billboard. And I don't have any further update, but I just kind of wanted to mention that since it kind of was off the list and now it's back on the list, at least for a little while.
You know, Barry, I've driven by that billboard looking for some signage on there talking about the River Road Farm Market, unless I'm looking at the wrong sign over there. What I see on there right now is advertisements for a rental recreation park trailer parking.
Okay, I think you're looking
At the wrong one?
at the wrong one.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think that farm market's been removed.
Yeah, the
Phil says,
farmer market sign came down. It was a hanging beneath the Coho Bend sign before.
okay. So we're back to,
The former Aaron's Hangar, and I need to come up with a new name for this that we all can understand what I'm talking about. But for now, that's the former Aaron's Hangar. Power lift doors completed their maintenance work and replaced the upper door seal. So last month they had done their periodic kind of maintenance and basically did inspections and did all that before the airline started. And then a second phase of this, which the board approved at the last meeting, was this replacement of the door seals. It was basically a full day project for them. They had to take off the siding of the building to get basically the rubber thing that they're installing as the seal installed behind it for basically rain shedding, etc. So that was completed, I want to say the last week of October, but it might have actually been the first part of November.
okay.
But that's completed. That hangar is now fully functional, fully repaired, and Cape Air is utilizing it every day. Future discussions on that, no progress, but I just kind of wanted to remind the board that we're working towards a March deadline to have something for the board to consider as kind of a long-term use for that hangar.
Barry, I have a question. What was the cost for the improvements to get that hangar to be used?
Total, it'll be around $5,000. That will be paid for essentially by Cape Air's lease of that over the winter. So, we're basically breaking even in the short term. And then as we come up with a long-term strategy for occupant and revenue stream from that, we'll be in the positive going forward.
Oh, that's great. Good work.
So again, as we walked through that process of basically accepting ownership of that hangar, we didn't know how expensive things were going to be, but we had quotes that ranged from $20,000 on up. The total ended up being about $5,000.
Barry, as Mark said, good job.
Any other questions? Okay, just kind of going through our bigger capital projects that are happening here. Our ALP update, Karina Newhoff, all the paperwork for that got approved and signed off last month. Karina Newhoff has been doing some surveying work on the airport this fall. But a lot of the work on this is, not on site, since the resultant product is basically a document that gets basically records the overall status of the airport facilities and looking out to the next 20 years. The Pfas testing also, which all those final documents were approved last month. There is a schedule for the environmental firm that's subcontracting some of the work to do on-site borings / wells at the end of this month. They've coordinated around the airline schedule and with the FAA on their navigation equipment. So basically, I forget what day it is. I want to say it's the 26th. No, that's Thanksgiving. It can't be the 26th. Maybe it's the 30th. They're going to be coming in, the FAA come in, will basically disable their equipment at the end of the day after the flight. So I think 7 or 7:30 in the evening. The contractor will be working overnight to get their borings and wells dug, and then have everything back online by 7 a.m. the next day. Runway resurfacing, it is the item that I had talked about when we talked about the agenda. All the final paperwork, except there was a mistake, which is resulting in a final change order or contract modification on that, which I will talk about more detail later. Cape Air Air Service update. Overall, Cape Air is doing well. There have been some issues, and I talked about some of these last month. Already mentioned our July passenger numbers. On-time performance, we already talked about. November is going to be slower than October. That is typical. November is a seasonally slow month. We generally have October is strong, usually the first 3 weeks until pretty much the weather changes and all the leaves are off the trees. And then kind of last week of October, kind of through, too late November is slow. And then there's the Thanksgiving period, which generally sees a strong uptick. We'll see this year how much that Thanksgiving period actually is an uptick. There are still seats available for that right now. And with the really active encouragement to not gather over Thanksgiving, I wouldn't be surprised to kind of see that be higher than the rest of the month, but not be near what it normally would be. And again, I mentioned earlier, I'm starting to see a slowdown that I attribute to COVID-related travel restrictions and kind of just the overall increase in cases in both Michigan and Illinois right now, as well as the rest of the country. But because we have a lot of passengers that are connecting between our two endpoints, Chicago and Northern Michigan, just starting to see that retract a bit, and we'll see where it all goes. Technim performance, I mentioned this last month, and just kind of give an update. So Cape Air is experiencing a greater number of Technim related issues that have led to more flights being operated with the Cessna 402 than we would like, than they would like, than our passengers would like. As Mr. Peterson mentioned last month at the meeting, acquaintances of his had commented to him on kind of the contrast between flying on the new Technim versus the old 402. I've heard that now a few times when flights have needed to be operated with the 402. So there is definitely a quality of service / comfort issue when we're not operating with the Technim. Now, we're very thankful that we have a spare aircraft based here such that we're not generally seeing cancellations as a result of any of the issues that come up. But there is a perception quality issue that we do see. And Cape Air is aware of this. They have basically done some changes internally. They've actually moved a Technim aircraft from New England to the Midwest to basically have an additional spare. They are having basically daily, if not more frequent conversations with the manufacturer about some of the issues. And I'm getting calls probably twice a week updating me on progress. And I am seeing things better with the changes that are being put into place. So they're doing the right things. They're still not happy internally because, as it was explained to me, they are in transitioning to a new aircraft. They're basically transitioning from high maintenance costs on the Cessna 402s that they own outright just because they're older equipment. And we're anticipating translating those into capital costs and payments on new equipment, but saving money by having lower maintenance costs. And right now they're having to pay for these new aircraft and have high maintenance costs, and that's not working for them. And that's why they are very, very interested in getting these issues resolved just from a financial standpoint on their costs.
Barry, do you know whether it's all their Technums or just one that happens to be in our use here? Or
It is all. And what's interesting is it's now it's not like it is the same issue that's happening across multiple. It's a variety of little things, and there are things that I'm confident will get addressed over time, because I mean, they're just, as a new aircraft comes off the production line, it's just got a lot of squawks that got to get addressed, and once those get passed, there's nothing inherently difficult about a piston aircraft, that to be good quality in service for extended periods of time. So it's just, there are just a lot of little things that keep cropping up. Any other comments or questions?
I just got to say that it seems like they should take care of these things as they come out of the factory instead of waiting until they go out in service.
Well, but the problem is you don't notice or have the issues until, the plane's operated for 100 hours type thing. So again, no one thing.
I know, but when you go out and you've operated these planes for 100 hours and you've got problems coming up, you should go back to the factory and check those coming off the line there before they go out into service, so you don't have that problem again, correct? That's just my way of thinking.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's why, I mentioned that they are working with the manufacturer on addressing issues once they come up with root cause analysis on what the issue is and how to prevent it going forward.
I like that term. I haven't heard that in a long time. Root cause analysis. I haven't heard that term in a long time. Go ahead.
Okay. I've already mentioned the fair item here. An update on capacity increases. So I mentioned last month that we're seeing, especially the first 3 quarters of October, a number of flights sold out, but sold out was only 7 seats. As of January, that number of available seats increases to 8. And then as of mid-February, it increases to 9. There are basically 2 items that are allowing each of these increases. The first being a manufacturer certification issue that allows a weight increase, a max weight increase on the aircraft. The second being a captain training issue that allows that second. They are hopeful that both of these dates are overly conservative and they'll be able to bump these up sooner. But these are what are currently already loaded into the system. And I know at least in one case, we have a flight in January for Martin Luther King weekend that is currently sold out at 8. So I have seen the evidence that they have actually implemented these changes as they have told me. But that actually leads into this next bullet point, which is something I want to explain, and then I'm looking for board input on. So the TECNIM is certified to only require a single pilot operation. We have seen generally 2 crew assigned to Manistee, a captain and first officer, and most flights operate that way, although there have been flights and there are times where only a single captain will operate the flight. And so from a overall FAA certification, what's required, Cape Air is doing everything, fine. However, under Essential Air Service, we are guaranteed service with 2 pilot aircraft and 2 pilot crews. And even more specific than that is if we have service provided to us with only a single pilot for more than 60 days consecutively, we lose our right to have 2 crew service in the future. It's one of those weird, you have this until you don't use it, and then if you don't use it, you lose it type situations. So in my conversation with Cape Air on kind of these seat increases, one of the comments that I received was, oh, your market is doing so well, we're probably going to switch to only scheduling a single pilot because that will basically allow us to operate more flights at 9 seats. And I said, wait a minute, this is the first time ever hearing of that. We are basically EAS, we have the right to have 2 pilots. And their response was, well, we can guarantee that no more than 60 days will go by without operating a flight with at least 2 crew. So you won't be subject to that. But we would like to schedule the majority of flights with single pilot. And I said, I need to have a conversation with the board and get the board's feedback as to how receptive they are to this. So that is the overall issue that I want your input on. Now, a little bit more that kind of plays into this from their side and what they're trying to accomplish is the maximum weight on these aircraft is tight, especially when we get to 9 seats. So 9 passengers plus 2 crew member plus baggage. And if, depending on weather conditions, how much fuel they need to carry to get to potentially an alternate airport, if weather in Chicago were to kind of close in route. All of those things add up to a fact that there likely will be times where we will be overweight if all of those things happened on the same day. Their first, Cape Air's first policy is in a situation like that, the first officer is the first person bumped. So that flight would be out of necessity operated with just a single pilot. before they would bump a passenger off of the plane for being overweight. So their concern is that if this were to happen frequently, that first officer, just the way the airline industry works, you don't fly, you don't get paid. He's basically then sitting here in Manistee or potentially in Chicago, not getting paid because he's repeatedly getting bumped. If that then becomes kind of the reputation of Manistee as a first officer, you're not going to get many hours, therefore you're not going to get paid very much. It will then be hard for Cape Air to get people to basically accept assignment to Manistee. That's the issue they're working on their side operationally, and why they proposed to me that they would just not schedule a first officer because it makes it easier for them. I guess my personal take is I would like them to operate as many flights as possible with a first officer. I think from a public perception standpoint, it's what the public expects. And we've already seen questions on social media about there only being one pilot, because our inaugural flight, the first flight of the first day, only had one captain. And there was a videographer that did a video of that flight, and therefore people watch these videos and it's like, wow, Manistee only has one pilot on their plane. And that presents concern. And also, I just don't want us to have to really be keeping track of, have we run into a 60-day, limit on not having any flight operated with two pilots, and then running into losing that that ability in the future to require two pilots.
Barry, if you're asking our comments and so on, my comment is definitely I would rather see a first officer and a captain on the plane. I would rather see a passenger bumped, especially in a scenario like you're talking about, poor weather, the possibility of having to land early or something like that. I think it's better to have two up front. So if it got down to the point of who you're going to drop off, the first officer or the passenger, I would do a passenger, then compensate them a little bit for volunteering to be taken off the plane. But no, I've been, if you reach a point where you reach that point where you are going to have to drop a first officer or a passenger, that should be 1 out of 99 times or less. That's my opinion.
Okay.
My opinion is that when we were picking out or choosing who was going to provide air service for us, one of the firms we liked, but they flew primarily smaller planes. And I think it was like there were one engine planes too.
Yep.
And we said, that's probably not going to work for us. We want to have a safer situation. And so that was a big decision to go with Cape Air. They were real close. Both of them were very good.
Yep.
Mark, you're right. Yes.
And I go along with you too. I think that, bumping a passenger or giving them some sort of, maybe a price off a ticket for the next time they fly or something. But I think we got to keep those two pilots in there. And then go back to that one plane that we were looking at. I think we all know that one crashed, I guess, and no one got hurt, I understand, but there was a problem with that particular airplane too. So that's my comments.
Barry, this is Andrew. I agree with what Jerry's stating. I guess my question would be, it sounded like you started this whole thing with, this is Cape Air's policy. So regardless of what we say or want, it's their policy that they bump the first officer first before passenger because they probably don't want the added expense of additional refunds and other things to the passenger, or is that something that we can ask them to do?
I think we have the ability to influence how they prioritize those things. And, you know, I mean, my goal would be to take this feedback and begin a dialogue with them on how we, you know, handle things going forward, taking all this into account. In any situation, there are a number of different factors that come into play. So I don't think I would approach them and say, it has to be this way because, you know, in circumstance X, Y, and Z, each one of those might, you know, require a slightly different handling of these, you know, factors. But I do think I'm hearing a very loud and clear, we want a first officer when that is at all feasible to happen, even to the point that we are inconveniencing passengers more than maybe typically your policy.
That's my feeling yet, yes.
I would agree with that.
Barry, my only concern would be is, I agree with everything you just said, but once you start bumping a passenger and word gets out that the wait is that close, does public perception change and they start saying, well, I don't even feel safe flying out of there?
Yep.
It's a good point, Andrew. That could happen.
Yep. And that's, and again, that it's balance, and that might ultimately lead to a discussion that they may come back and say, the best way that we can meet your requirements and not inconvenience a large number of passengers, creating a negative perception, is to limit to 8 seats instead of 9.
Right. Well, let's get to that point before we take any further action on it. But yeah, that's a possibility if it comes down to that.
How did this come up? I mean, it's kind of like they're switching on us here because the bid was for 2 piloted planes right from the start. And to me, it sounds like the rare situation where it might happen is exactly the situation where you're more likely to need 2 pilots.
Correct. That's what I was thinking also.
And, you know, but again, a lot of factors can go into that. It can be a perfectly sunny day, but you have
Right.
a mix of passengers that each have 2 large bags. And that's what's driving you being overweight. I mean, all of these different factors come into play.
And then one of those factors could be saying, if that's the first plane going out for the day, saying, folks, put your bag on the next plane. Are you going anyplace? We'll get it to you.
Yep.
Something like that, you know, another thought process.
Is there a possibility that the demand for flight to increase where you would need a bigger plane too? Is that a possibility or not?
Well, they don't operate a bigger plane. So, you know, for the length of our EAS contract, that's not an option. But, you know, potentially more flights could be. And, you know, there's, again, so many factors around, you know, we're in the midst of a pandemic. So therefore, you know, we don't really, I mean, the industry as a whole isn't predicting a return to normal traffic levels for 2 to 3 years, you know, which is even longer than our contract. How that is offset by, you know, having interline connecting flights in O'Hare and fares right now that look really good. We don't really, it's really hard to predict what demand is going to be. But, you know, there is that possibility that, you know, increasing flights, even though they wouldn't be subsidized under certain circumstances, that could make sense.
Okay.
Okay, Barry, any other comments from the group here? If not, I think, Barry, you should have enough feel for the direction we want to go or stay at.
I pretty much heard a very strong consensus on what I summarized earlier. So that is the feedback I will take back to Cape Air. And I'll keep you updated as we work through this with them.
Okay, sounds good.
I mentioned this last month. Not a lot has changed, although, Andrew, thank you for the contact. I know there has been follow-up. I actually haven't really gotten an update in the last week or so on whether at least some of that baggage delivery and those things are now addressed. I believe they are, but I actually haven't got confirmation on that. But, you know, just in general, as a community, we do struggle with local transportation. And, you know, that's is going to be more obvious as we move forward with a carrier that provides good connecting service. That ties me into the rental car. The first half of this is all, you know, the same as I reported last month, although I'm now seeing, even in late October and early November, that we are out of rental cars on the weekends. So if we're out in October and November, that same number of cars clearly is not going to be enough come summer.
So that's the original 8 you got on here from
Yes.
Maori yet, right?
Yep. Conversations started with Hertz. Watson's, Manistee, I don't even know what corporately they go by now because they've got Ludington, Benzie, Manistee, and I think they've got a 4th dealership down in the Grand Rapids area. They are interested in partnering. They actually have a facility on US 31 that they kind of purchased with the intent of turning it into a rental car facility. They are now re-engaged with me on this. Unfortunately, Hertz has kind of gone quiet. So I reported last month that I had a good call with them. There was a follow-up call scheduled. They missed the follow-up call. We had a little bit back and forth in email, and then they just have gone quiet. So that just needs to, you know, keep getting attention and just kind of digging up, you know, interest there. Because I think for the first time, we are aligned on the Manistee side as to, you know, the right players are at the table to actually do something. We just need the national partner right now. And Hertz seems to be the ideal candidate given what programs they have for kind of small operations like ours would be. But again, they're in the midst of a bankruptcy, and, you know, I don't know if that's the reason, or we're just too small right now for them to be, you know, too interested in us. But
I'm gonna say the bankruptcy might have some impact on it.
I'm sure it does.
Right,
Impact.
right. They're trying to figure out what to do when you go into bankruptcy, and the last thing they want to do is go out to Manistee, Michigan to put 3 cars out here.
Right. But again,
But that'd be great if they did.
so that's my latest update there.
Okay.
Marketing update. I don't know when we will schedule our annual marketing update to the board. Typically, we would have done that by now. We're kind of still on hold as we kind of just are working with Cape Air and, you know, kind of understanding our relationship. We're now good about our regularly scheduled meetings with Cape Air. It took us a few hiccups on, you know, starting with dates and times that then ultimately didn't work because people's things changed. But I think we're now set on our regular biweekly meetings with that. I've got a call this afternoon, which would be our next one with them. And then the last update here is their typical start a new community process is to have a ribbon cutting event that originally was going to be towards the end of October. Then we decided to move it to early November. Then we kind of ran into some scheduling issues with their upper management who generally attend these events. And now with kind of COVID related restrictions coming back into effect, right now I'd say we're indefinitely postponed. And I'm probably leaning towards the fact that this probably isn't going to happen, because I think the first window where we'd really have an ability to do this will be into the new year. And we're so far then removed from the actual start of service that I'm not sure it actually makes sense anymore. So, but that hasn't been decided yet. But I know that's going to be a topic of conversation on our call this afternoon.
Well, keep pressing them. I think it'd be nice to have something to say that we got a new plane service in town here.
Yep.
And can't we even do that on a virtual basis? I don't know if you have a Facebook page or something like that, but record something and put it on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly things that we can do, but what they standard like to do, which they've been trying to do, is just looking less and less likely. So again, we've got a call this afternoon, and that will be the main topic, I believe, of that conversation. But we'll look for something.
Okay.
My last slide here is basically just reminding the board about updates I would like the board to pursue as it relates to the overall airport rules and regulations document. I hope everyone got the existing document after our last meeting. And there are really three things that are kind of in the pipeline that I think specifically need to be addressed, although I'm sure there are areas that could use attention since that document hasn't really been looked at for 9 years. But that's auto rental service standards, air tour, sightseeing flight standards, since we have a new party on airport that is looking to begin that service. And then as we talk about hangar use, potential aircraft maintenance on site, and what our requirements or standards for that might be. So just consider that a reminder for the board to come up with a strategy as to how they would like to review and update that document. And that's the end of my report.
Yeah, the only thing I mentioned last time was perhaps some ad hoc committee. But I'm just thinking to myself right now that perhaps I will make a one-on-one call to all the board members to see if they're interested in forming or being part of such a committee. And I'm thinking probably like 3 people on that would be sufficient to get us started. That's my thoughts on it.
That sounds fine to me.
Okay, well, let's try to do that. Okay, let's move on to old business. And Barry, we've got this contract modification that you passed out to us that we'll put into the old business.
Let me bring it up.
Right, bring it up. It looks like it's just, everything is just paperwork.
Yes.
There's no dollar changes to it.
Exactly. So I'll.
It's just simply them cleaning up their paperwork.
So everyone can see this. So this is contract modification number 5. Last month we approved number 4. The net change is for $0, so this doesn't impact the dollar value of the contract. And as you look at the body, you'll see basically offsetting entries. So a dollar value increase in this one category of 1,880 and a decrease in another. And it's basically adjusting it to be associated with the proper category type item that it got misallocated in the previous one. And then the same thing for the second item. If you were to look at the minutes of last month's meeting, you would basically see that modification number 4 had 2 line items, an $1,880 and a $12,114.82. And this is basically reversing those and putting them into the correct item codes. So that is what I would be looking for the board to authorize me to sign at this point.
I'll make a motion for you to sign on behalf of the board.
And I'll second that. I know you folks don't have a copy of it, but it's very, very much what Barry's, if you're reading the stuff he put on the screen there, it's very much what he just said. It's adding one side into it and subtracting the other side out. So the whole thing is still a net 0. So I'll second the motion. Roll call, Julie?
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
and Mr. Gentili.
Yes.
Okay, as far as I know, no other old business / unfinished business. So any new business? I'm not aware of any.
Jerry, I've got one additional comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Looking at my notes and I realized I forgot to put it in my report. I've been contacted by the assistant airport manager of Green Bay. And apparently Green Bay has reached out to Cape Air inquiring if they would be interested in offering service between Manistee and Green Bay.
That's exciting.
After I got that call or left a message and got an email from Green Bay, I then reached out to Cape Air and say, before I respond to them, I kind of need to know what this is about. So I make sure that I'm, communicating the right messaging. And periodically airports and air carriers have essentially like speed dating rounds where you basically go to a conference and you get 15 minutes to make your pitch to an airline as to why you want them to provide service to you. And that's kind of what happened here is Green Bay signed up for their 15-minute spiel to Cape Air. And Cape Air is very intrigued by this. So they are going to, pursue and see what, might happen. This would be unsubsidized, so it would need to actually cover its costs. And that's what makes Green Bay actually very interesting because it's about as close as you can get mile-wise across the lake and still be a, somewhat major airport. So we'll see where this goes. It probably would be, limited frequency,
Correct.
2-4 times a week maybe, but and probably seasonal. But we'll see if this develops into anything. So I just wanted to give the board the fact that contact has happened and it's kind of being followed up on.
So Green Bay has contacted Cape Air.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. Sounds interesting. A little different. Okay, any further comments by board members?
Just one, and that is in regard to the car rental. If we can do anything to help Cape Air with a lift in regard to trying to acquire a car rental company of stature, we need to be all in.
And Jeff, the chamber and economic development folks have been very helpful in everything they've been doing. So, yes, there's nothing I need right now, but I know I have the resources there if it comes to that.
Would the casino have any interest in providing automobiles?
We presently do not have any. All we have is the shuttle buses. We looked into getting a vehicle for our VIPs, but with the shutdown that occurred, that got canceled because people don't want to ride together right now.
Oh, sure, yeah. So that it might have some potential down the road when this thing gets taken care of.
Possibly. It's just right now in the current operating situation, there's just not a lot of desire of the VIPs to come together right now.
Yeah, that's very understandable.
Okay. I just have one comment for the two board members that recently ran in the election and won. Congratulations.
Thank you. Glad to still be in the game.
Okay, good. Then you also, Karen.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments?
That was going to be my comment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Why don't you jump in there faster?
Yeah. So congratulations from me as well.
So Barry,
Thank
next time you can run and I'll vote for you. Okay. If nothing further is needed to be said, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.